everyone, welcome to today's episode of Wake the Future. You probably noticed that I am here doing this by myself, and this does not mean that I don't love Jared anymore. It just means that I have had a lot of thoughts rattling in my own brain, and those thoughts are about thinking and the future of thinking itself, and what happens to our own thinking when we defer to AI. Now, I'm going to share a whole bunch of research with you that I've come across that I think is really interesting. The first comes out of MIT, and MIT researchers recently took 54 university students, wired them up with EEG headsets, and split them into 3 groups. One group wrote essays using ChatGPT, one used Google, and one used nothing but their own brain. And they ran this for 4 months, and what they found was that the ChatGPT group had the lowest cognitive activity of all 3 groups. And when I say lower, what the study showed was that it was measurably and significantly lower. Brain function declined in key areas over time. So then when researchers asked those students to actually quote from the essays that they had written, 83% of them couldn't do it. 83% of them could not recall the content from their own work. So the researchers gave it a name that I've been thinking about now for so long, which is cognitive debt. This term cognitive debt comes directly from this MIT study, and it's worth unpacking because cognitive debt is more precise than the fact that, okay, AI might be making us lazy or stupid. Debt is a heavy word, right? Debt implies something very specific. It's like you're almost consuming something now that then you'll have to repay later, like a cognitive bank. And in many cases, that debt is almost invisible. It's like you don't even realize that you're accruing it. It compounds over time. And that's been the sticking point for me, right? It's like that becomes very dangerous. And cognitive debt, every time you outsource any facet of your thinking to AI, every time you reach for it, before you've even attempted to wrestle with that thought yourself, it's almost like you're making a small withdrawal from a cognitive account. That output arrives, you might be super happy because you're like, my problem was solved. And in that moment, nothing in your head feels lost. You're like, I'm good. But when you think of the brain, it's very much like a use it or lose it organ. It helps with critical thinking, reasoning, deep analysis. A lot of those things are only maintained when you use it. It's a muscle just like anything else. Just like how a muscle weakens when it stops being like turbo booster loaded in the gym. Physical atrophy you can actually feel. You can feel when like your body might not be doing that work. But mental atrophy, it doesn't really work the same way. So let's go back to the MIT study. The MIT study didn't just measure brain activity during the task. They then ran a 4th session where they switched the groups. So the students who had been using ChatGPT were asked to write with no tools, and the students who had been writing alone were switched to ChatGPT. So what happened? The students who switched from ChatGPT to brain only showed reduced alpha and beta brain connectivity under engagement, right? Their brains did not work the same way. Their brains, then after months of offloading their work, were no longer as effective at engaging without the tool. The students who switched from brain only to ChatGPT, what did they have? They had higher memory recall, better activation of the brain regions associated with reasoning and spatial thinking. So it's almost as if months of doing their own cognitive work had built something that didn't disappear the moment they picked up an AI tool. So the direction of this effect matters. Basically, what the study showed us was that if we go from effort to AI assistance, the brain holds its gains. But if we go from AI dependency to effort, the brain struggles to re-engage. So this is a massive asymmetry that we have to be paying attention to. All right, so now I want to look at another study, and this one is a 2025 study that came out of Microsoft and Carnegie Mellon. And it said this, quote, "A key irony of automation is that by mechanizing routine tasks, you deprive the user of the routine opportunities to practice their judgment and strengthen their cognitive musculature, leaving them atrophied and unprepared when the exceptions do arise. Now, I read that and I paused on this phrase, cognitive musculature. Then I paused on atrophied and unprepared. All right, so let's unpack what it says. It took 319 knowledge workers and 936 real-world AI-assisted tasks across industries, legal, marketing, engineering, healthcare, education, you name it. And what it found was that the more confident workers were in AI's ability to do the task, the less critical thinking they applied to the output. The researchers also identified something they called mechanized convergence. What this means is that as more people use the same AI tools for the same kinds of tasks, the output becomes very similar. Basically, prompts converge, results cluster. And that diversity of thought, right? All of those original framings, unique perspectives, it narrows. So you might have better looking work, but the result is less original thinking. You have these very polished outputs, but are they actually being prompted with genuine ideas? Now, research has also indicated that in specific tests, only 6% of AI-generated ideas were considered unique, compared to 100% in a human control group. Now, this came out of Wharton. And one of the biggest things is, again, AI models are trained on existing data. You can likely predict a lot of their responses. If they're given the same prompt multiple times, it tends to average those results. The ideas are less unique, and over time, it starts degrading the quality of not just the output, but the thinking. So are we masquerading in all of these things around productivity, efficiency, all of these metrics, where maybe we just need to pause? And by pause, I mean even just slam our foot on the brake and say, okay, if we're just masquerading as more productive, how do we really think more critically about the output? And how do we look inwardly to actually say, what effect is this having on my own cognition? If we are to get to A plus I, agency plus identity, which are the two massive human-centric pillars that are coming out of this new AI age, then we better get our thinking screwed on right first, versus just talking about all of these human-centric attributes, which are great. We have to be critical thinkers. We have to be better at emotional intelligence. We have to be adaptable. We need to tap into empathy. We need to exercise a sense of judgment. We need to be discerning. And all of these things, right? All of these skill sets, all of these human-centric characteristics. But if we are coming at it from a place of cognitive debt, cognitive surrender, cognitive load, then we better work on that first before we get to all of these other things. So the third study that I want to talk about comes out of the Swiss Business School, and this really is what I would call the age factor. So they took almost 700 participants across age groups, age 17 to 55 plus from diverse educational backgrounds, and they sought to answer this question, which is, does AI tool usage affect critical thinking? And does cognitive offloading explain the relationship? And the short and sweet of this is that yes, the answer is yes on both counts. Frequent AI use correlated negatively with critical thinking ability, and cognitive offloading, which is this habit of delegating thinking to external tools, was the mechanism that connected the two. But one of the things that I found was the most interesting was this. The youngest group, the 17 to 25-year-olds, showed the highest AI dependence and the lowest critical thinking scores of any age group tested. Now, we're not talking about adults who might have developed their cognitive capacity before AI arrived and now they're like, oh, I'm at risk of losing it. We are talking here about a generation that is building their thinking habits, right? Their cognitive scaffolding at a time where technological use might actually be undermining those habits. So you think of, oh my God, the implications for how we parent, educate, design learning environments, and we are just beginning to reckon with what all of this means. Now, take this whole notion of cognitive offloading, and let's talk about something I think even more serious, which is cognitive surrender, which is where you're not delegating specific tasks strategically, but you're actually handing off the act of thinking itself before you've even tried. Now, there is a principle in psychology called the law of less work. Basically, it's also called the principle of least effort. And when given a choice, what this says is that humans avoid cognitive demand. We're not by default kind of effort-seeking creatures when it comes to thinking. We love heuristics, we love shortcuts. It's kind of like a lot of humans will choose the path of least resistance. And for a lot of human history, it actually served us pretty well. We tried not to waste a lot of mental energy on the things that we didn't need to waste mental energy on. But this was kind of designed for a time when thinking was not necessarily as much of an option, and AI then came in and eroded all of that. Our brains are in many cases doing exactly now with AI with what they were designed to do, taking the easier path without noticing then that that easier path has a massive, massive cost. We talk so much about efficiency and productivity. And in prior episodes, we have talked about this tug of war, this gulf that is emerging between the new and the old, and how we're stuck in the middle between old industrialized era thinking, old industrialized era frameworks, old ways of measuring talent and skills, and the new. And we're not, frankly, going to get to the new, get to all of the massive things that AI could do for us and elevate up to the next higher order value proposition, which goes beyond critical thinking. It goes beyond judgment. It goes beyond adaptability. It goes beyond empathy. It goes beyond emotional intelligence. We have to work on really building that thinking muscle, training for it like we train at the gym, right? Strengthening our cognition, fighting against a lot of our default psychology, even some of our default neurological wiring to actually say, I need to do the hard work first. The work that requires just thinking, exercising that thinking muscle. Right? Because the more that we default to a lot of these tools, the more that we give up mental sovereignty in the name of convenience or productivity, right? That's where we're really going to be lost. There is one last part of this I want to talk about beyond cognitive surrender. And there is something else out there, kind of this weird murky space of belief offloading. Okay, there were 3 experiments with more than 1,300 people. And when participants had access to an AI assistant, they used it on more than half of all their tasks. Their accuracy, it almost mirrored AI exactly. When AI was right, they were right. When AI was wrong, so were they. And here's the part that really matters. And this is that agency piece. They weren't checking it. They weren't evaluating the output. They weren't running the answer through kind of their own mental pinwheel of judgment. They were just blindly adopting it. No effort, no analysis applied. The AI answered, they moved on. So that's not thinking with AI, right? We're past that stage. This is letting AI think instead of you. And this is the framework that we use, the A+I framework, human agency. And at the farthest end of this is agency decay, and it starts with offloading. Fine, but then it moves into dependence, which we really have to be mindful of. And then it ends in surrender, where the thinking that used to happen inside of you is now happening externally in something else entirely. And so many of us are not even noticing it. So this question that I keep coming back to is, at what point does the tool stop serving the mind and start replacing it altogether? So here's the thing that we have to remember. Awareness alone is not enough. We have to work on our thinking muscle. We need a practice commitment to keeping our cognitive agency intact. Remember, you are the pilot. AI is the co-pilot. That sequence matters. Do not relinquish your control. So here is something that you can do. Super simple every single day. Write something by hand. There was a Norwegian university study in 2024 that found 16 distinct neural connections in the brain that activate solely during handwriting. None of them activate during typing. They're called the theta and alpha bands, and they are associated with deep focus, memory consolidation, creative thinking. They light up when your hand is forming letters in a way that a keyboard cannot replicate. Pick up your pen. This doesn't have to be a journal. It doesn't have to be anything deep or profound. It can just be a list of things you're thinking about, a question you haven't answered yet. It doesn't even matter. It can be some crazy half-formed idea that doesn't go anywhere. The point is in the movement itself. It is slow. It is effortful. It is almost embodied. It makes your thoughts physical. The research asks for not an hour, 4 minutes. So the machines are going to keep on improving. AI is going to get better. Convenience is going to get significantly more easy. The path of least resistance is going to be something that is so tempting. But I want to ask you this one very simple question. Just think about it, pause on it, let it ruminate on it, whatever it is, ask your kids. But the question is a very simple and straightforward one, which is, when was the last time you thought something through, all the way through, entirely on your own? Not defaulting to technology, not using AI as kind of a ping pong partner, not bouncing anything off of anything other than your own mind. Think about it. So here's why I feel so deeply about this, because here's what's actually at stake here. It's not about productivity and it's not about efficiency. We need to stop talking about those things so much, because what is at stake right now is the capacity to be the author of your own life. It is agency. And it's not just about being able to make choices. It is about the thinking that is yours. The fact that they came from somewhere real. It belongs to you. That's not a luxury. If we start deferring more of our thinking to AI, we could lose the thread of who we actually are. And in our own words, our own effort, do we want to outsource all of these things? Right? One of the things that concerns me the most is that it's almost happening so quietly. It's invisible. It's like there's no warning. It's just the things keep getting done. Everything at the surface looks fine until you just start questioning your own judgment, your own perspective, and then you try to reach for something and you're like, it was there, but it's quietly been eroding. And that ultimately is the risk. AI is not malicious. It's not alive. It's all about that thinking muscle. It is interrupting that because we decided to stop using it. We wanted to eliminate friction. And in some ways that feels good. But then you're like, wait, time out. What have I actually lost in the process? And what you have lost in the process is both your agency and many facets of your own identity. So stay strong, stay human, stay sovereign, and remember to follow Wake the Future for more. Thank you for joining me in today's episode. We'll be talking about this again. If you enjoyed today's conversation, like, follow, and subscribe to stay ahead of what's next. I'm Erica Orange.
And I'm Jared Weiner. Thanks for waking the future with us. We'll see you next time.